A horse stands on a Montana hillside. The sun is still high. The temperature is 90 degrees. The wind carries the smell of gunpowder and something else, something sweet and thick and wrong. Around him, 210 men lie dead, across the grass and the dust and the shallow ravines that cut through the ridge like open wounds. Some lie in clusters of 2 or 3, fallen where they tried to hold a line that no longer existed. Some lie alone, far from anyone, as though they died running and simply stopped. Some are curled behind dead horses, in positions that suggest they were hiding when death found them. The horse has 7 bullets in his body. Neck, lung, hindquarters. Blood has dried into dark streaks across his coat. But he is standing. His name is Comanche. He belongs to Captain Miles Keogh of Company 1, 7th United States Cavalry. Keogh is dead. His company is dead. Every man who rode north with George Armstrong Custer that afternoon is dead. Comanche is the only living thing on the battlefield. He saw everything. He watched as America's most celebrated Indian fighter led his men into annihilation. He stood there as military discipline dissolved into terror, as trained soldiers broke and ran, as men who had survived the Civil War died crying in the dirt of a Montana hillside. But here is what the history books will not tell you. Those soldiers did not die in neat rows with weapons raised in defiance. They died running. Some were found in ravines, hiding. Others in clusters, having shot each other rather than face what was coming over the ridge. The battlefield stretched over miles because these were not men making a stand. They were men in full flight. 210 men against 1,800 warriors. 67 minutes. Not a single survivor. And the real story is not a last stand at all. It is a last collapse. A progressive disintegration of an entire command, minute by minute, company by company, man by man. And one horse who watched it all. To understand how 210 elite cavalrymen met such a fate, you have to go back 3 months to when the United States government decided that Black Hills gold was worth more than any treaty. The Fort Laramie Treaty of 1868 had promised the Black Hills to the Lakota forever. Forever lasted 6 years. In 1874, George Armstrong Custer himself led an expedition that confirmed gold in those sacred hills. Within 2 years, 15,000 miners flooded the territory. The government offered to buy the land. When the tribes refused, Washington chose a different solution: military force. Custer was the instrument they chose. He had graduated last in his West Point class, but rose to become the youngest general in the Union Army at 23. By 1876, reduced to lieutenant colonel, he commanded the 7th Cavalry. His flowing hair and buckskin jackets made him a frontier celebrity. But his men knew a different man, a commander who had soldiers flogged for minor infractions, who abandoned a campaign to visit his wife, who ordered deserters shot without trial. Against him stood 2 men he would never understand. Sitting Bull, a Lakota holy man whose authority came from spiritual power, not military command. That spring, Sitting Bull had performed the Sundance and seen a vision of soldiers falling into camp like grasshoppers from the sky. At the abandoned Sundance grounds on Rosebud Creek, scouts found the vision recreated as a sand drawing, soldiers falling headfirst into an Indian camp. The scouts understood immediately. Custer saw only superstition, and there was Crazy Horse, the military genius who had never been photographed, never signed a treaty, never lost a battle. His decoy tactics at Fort Phil Kearny had lured 80 soldiers to their deaths a decade earlier. Now he commanded warriors who knew every ridge, every water source, every blind spot in their ancestral land. 25,000 people had gathered along the Little Bighorn River, the largest assembly of Plains tribes ever recorded. 8,000 men, women, children, and elderly in over 1,000 lodges. The pony herd alone numbered 20,000. At any moment, between 1,500 and 2,000 fighting men could respond to an attack. This was not a war camp. It was a mobile city. The army's plan was a three-column convergence. General Crook from the south, Colonel Gibbon from the west, General Terry with Custer's 7th Cavalry from the east. But on June 17th, Crazy Horse met Crook at Rosebud Creek and fought him to a standstill. Crook retreated to Wyoming without sending word. The closing fist now had one finger broken, and Custer did not know it. General Terry offered Custer 2 Gatling guns and additional infantry. Custer refused both. The guns would slow him down. Speed would win this campaign. Then came the warnings. Custer's Crow and Araucarian scouts could track anything that moved across the plains, and what they tracked terrified them. The trail showed more lodgepole marks than anyone had ever seen. Half Yellowface, the lead Crow scout, tried to explain. More enemies than leaves on all the trees. Bloody Knife predicted they would find enough Lakota to keep them fighting for days. White Man Runs Him warned that the trail showed a village larger than any warrior had seen. And Mitch Boyer, a mixed-blood interpreter who knew the country better than any white man alive, spoke plainly. "General, if you attack that camp, you and all your men will be killed." Custer's reply revealed everything about the man. "I guess you are a coward." Boyer's response should have ended the conversation. "I will go wherever you do, but we will both be dead." 24 scouts from 3 different tribes, 24 warnings in 3 different languages, and one man who heard none of them. Dawn broke on June 25th. Within hours, the killing would begin. And the man leading 700 soldiers into the valley had just refused the only weapons that might have saved them. At noon on June 25th, under a sun already brutal, Custer divides his command. Captain Frederick Benteen takes 3 companies, 125 men, to scout bluffs to the south. Major Marcus Reno gets 3 companies, 140 men, to cross the Little Bighorn and charge the southern end of the village. Custer keeps 5 companies, 210 men, and turns north along the bluffs. 1 pack train with the reserve ammunition stays behind, guarded by Captain McDougall's company. 700 fighting men have become 4 separate forces, unable to support each other, approaching an enemy that outnumbers them nearly 3 to 1. But here is what Custer did not know. The village was not running. Warriors were painting themselves for battle, checking weapons, catching their best war ponies. Women packed valuables not to flee, but to free their men for fighting. Sitting Bull, too old for combat, would guard the women and children. Crazy Horse prepared his warriors for the soldiers he already knew were coming. At 2 in the afternoon, Reno's battalion reaches the Little Bighorn. The river runs low, barely knee-deep on the horses. They splash across and form a battle line on the valley floor. 112 men in blue against the haze. Reno orders the charge. Horses surge forward at a gallop. Dust billows. After 1 mile, warriors appear from ravines, not fleeing, advancing. Hundreds of them, firing from horseback, pouring from the village every second. Reno halts, dismounts, forms a skirmish line. Every 4th trooper holds horses while 3 others fire. Textbook cavalry tactics, except they are outnumbered 10 to 1 in open ground with no cover. And the warriors carry Winchester repeating rifles traded from Canadian merchants. 16 shots without reloading. The soldiers carry single-shot Springfield carbines. 1 round, extract, reload, 1 round. The volume of fire is not even close. Warriors sweep around both flanks like water around a rock. The skirmish line holds for 30 minutes. Then it collapses. The Araucarian scout Bloody Knife, riding next to Reno, takes a round through the skull. His brains spray across Reno's face and uniform. Something breaks in the major. He orders retreat to the timber along the river. The trees offer little protection. Warriors infiltrate from all sides. After another 30 minutes, Reno shouts to mount and ride for the bluffs across the river. What follows is not retreat, it is rout. Men flee in panic. The river crossing becomes a killing ground. Soldiers trapped in soft mud make easy targets. Lieutenant Benjamin Hodgson falls into the water, shot through the leg. An officer grabs him. A second bullet finds its mark. Bodies float downstream. Of Reno's 140 men, 40 are dead, wounded, or missing within an hour. The survivors claw up the bluffs and dig in. They are shattered, leaderless in all but name. Some show signs of combat shock, staring at nothing, unable to reload their weapons. Benteen arrives with his 3 companies. He looks at the chaos, the wounded men, the panicked horses. He has Custer's last message in his pocket. "Come on! Big village! Be quick!" He looks north, toward the dust and the distant sound of gunfire, and he makes a decision. He stays with Reno. He does not ride to find Custer. Whether that decision was prudent or damning, history has never fully settled. 3 miles to the north, Custer's column is riding toward something far worse. His last message, carried by trumpeter John Martin, reads, "Benteen, come on, big village. Be quick. Bring packs." Martin is the last man to see Custer's battalion alive. 3 miles away, Custer has just seen the village in its entirety, and it is far too late to retreat. 3:15 in the afternoon. From the heights above Medicine Tail Coulee, George Armstrong Custer finally sees the village. The sight stops him cold. Tipis stretch beyond the range of field glasses. The pony herd covers square miles. Smoke from cooking fires creates its own weather. This is not a target, it is a nation, and it is boiling with warriors. Sergeant Daniel Canipe gallops past, carrying Custer's last coherent order to the rear. "We have got them, boys," Custer shouts, but his voice carries false bravado that fools no one. Officers exchange glances. They can count. Below them, warriors mass by the hundreds. More stream from the village every moment. Custer leads his 5 companies down Medicine Tail Coulee toward the river. 210 men in column. Horses struggling in the 90-degree heat after a night march with no water and no rest. The plan is clear. Cross at the natural ford. Strike the village center while warriors engage Reno to the south. Classic Custer. Audacious, aggressive, assuming enemy panic. But archaeological evidence reveals something devastating. Shell casings show the soldiers never reached the river in force. Warriors had already crossed to meet them. White Cow Bull, a Miniconjou warrior, would later describe watching blue-coated soldiers ride down the coulee like buffalo going to water. Easy targets against the skyline. The first shots crack out. Company L under Lieutenant James Calhoun, Custer's brother-in-law, takes the lead. Warriors hidden in brush along the river open fire. Horses scream and fall. The momentum breaks. Instead of a charge, it becomes a probe, then a hesitation, then a halt. Soldiers expected warriors to defend from the village. Instead, hundreds crossed the river, moving upstream and downstream, beginning the surround. Gal, whose wives and children had been killed in Reno's attack just an hour earlier, led warriors with a fury that went beyond tactics. This was personal. Every bullet he fired carried the weight of everything he had lost that afternoon. Grief would come later. In that moment, there was only rage, and rage does not miss. From the village, a sound builds that no soldier ever forgets. The war cries of over 1,000 warriors taking the field. Lakota, Cheyenne, Arapaho, each with their own battle songs, create a wall of sound that carries over gunfire. Women trill encouragement from the village. The sound alone is enough to break a man's nerve. While Gall pinned the soldiers at the ford, Crazy Horse led hundreds of warriors in a sweeping movement north and east, racing through ravines the soldiers could not see, heading for ground the soldiers had not yet reached. The trap was closing, and Crazy Horse had already thought 3 moves ahead. They knew every draw, every ridge, every blind spot. The soldiers were insects, trapped in a web of terrain their commander had never seen before and would never see again. Custer had expected them to run. They did not run. They hunted. Instead of massing for dramatic charges, warriors infiltrated in small groups, using ravines and folds in the earth to creep within rifle range. Their Winchesters and Henry repeaters could fire 16 shots without reloading. Constant pressure from every direction, never letting soldiers organize or aim properly. Wooden Leg, a Cheyenne warrior, described the rhythm. We young men rushed in to strike blows or fire guns, then raced away. New groups rushed in while we caught our breath. Death by 1,000 cuts. And then something even more terrifying happened. The soldiers' own weapons turned against them. The Springfield Model 1873 carbine was a single-shot breech-loading weapon. After each round, the trooper had to extract the spent casing and insert a new cartridge. In the 90-degree heat, with soldiers firing as fast as they could, the copper cartridge cases expanded inside the breech and jammed. Troopers desperately pried at stuck shells with pocket knives, while warriors closed in around them. Archaeological excavation of the battlefield has recovered dozens of unfired cartridges, with pry marks gouged into the rim. Men died trying to clear weapons that had become useless metal in their hands. Picture a soldier on a Montana hillside, 90 degrees, enemies closing from 3 directions. His rifle is jammed. He is on his knees, digging at a stuck cartridge with a pocket knife, his hands shaking, while the man next to him takes an arrow through the chest and falls across his lap. That is not a painting. That is the archaeology. That is what the shell casings and the pry marks and the scattered bones tell us actually happened on this ground. Meanwhile, the warriors they faced could fire 16 rounds without stopping. The technological advantage that the army assumed it held was on this field completely reversed. The temperature made everything worse. 90 degrees drained strength from horses already exhausted from a night march. Soldiers in wool uniforms dehydrated. Canteens emptied. The river, so close they could hear it, might as well have been 100 miles away. Thirst became another enemy, killing them from inside, while bullets killed them from outside. By 4 o'clock, Custer's battalion has given up reaching the village. They are not attacking anymore. They are reacting. Companies wheel north, seeking high ground. But Crazy Horse has already cut off the retreat. Warriors stream through ravines, racing to positions the soldiers have not yet reached. The hunting party has become the hunted. And here is the fatal mistake that sealed every man's death. Instead of concentrating his remaining force into a single defensive position, Custer strung his 5 companies out over a mile of ridgeline. Company L on Calhoun Hill, Company I under Keogh on a ridge to the northwest, Companies C, E, and F moving toward what would become Last Stand Hill, spread too thin to support each other, too far apart to concentrate fire. Each company fighting its own separate battle against an enemy that could see all of them at once. At 4:15, Lieutenant Calhoun tries to establish a defensive position on Calhoun Hill. Company L dismounts, forms a rough skirmish line. It is good ground, high with clear fields of fire. For a moment, it seems like order might hold. Then, Crazy Horse's force appears from the north and east. Behind them, the terrible realization: they are surrounded. No retreat, no reinforcement, no escape. The power dynamic shifts completely. Warriors gain confidence with each small victory. They can see soldiers falling, see the panic spreading. Some warriors capture cavalry horses and weapons. They turn army carbines against their former owners. Tom Custer commands Company C. He wears 2 medals of honor from the Civil War, the only soldier to earn 2 during that conflict. He captured Confederate battle flags in hand-to-hand combat. Now he watches his company shrink under accurate rifle fire from warriors he cannot see, in terrain he does not know. No flags to capture here. only survival to fight for. And survival is no longer possible. Then comes a sound that changes everything. The recall trumpet. Custer orders all companies to concentrate on the highest hill, but it is too late for organized movement. The retreat becomes a race. Companies dissolve into groups. Groups dissolve into individuals. Some make it to the hill, many do not. Keogh's Company 1 dies where it stands, protecting the retreat. Keogh himself falls near his horse. Comanche takes 7 bullets but remains standing. Warriors ride down running soldiers like buffalo across the open ground. The archaeology tells the story that the paintings never could. Shell casings spread over miles, showing running fights, not heroic squares. Bodies found far from the hill, in ravines, behind sagebrush, anywhere men sought cover. Some with only a few shells nearby. They died quickly, others surrounded by dozens of casings. They sold their lives dearly, but they all died. This is the truth the paintings never show. There was no ring of soldiers, no raised saber, no flowing golden hair. There was a line of men that broke, and then there was running, and then there was dying. By 4:45, perhaps 80 men are still alive. They cluster on a rise in the ground that history will call Last Stand Hill. But the name itself is a lie. The hill is barely a rise in the ground, too small for effective defense. No water, no cover, no hope. Wooden Leg watched the final stages from the slopes below. The soldiers were very brave. They kept together and kept fighting. But keeping together meant dying together. Warriors fired from every direction. Hundreds of rifles shooting at dozens of men. The volume of incoming fire made defense impossible. Men fell every second. Some soldiers shot their horses and piled behind the carcasses for cover. A cavalry tactic for desperate situations. But dying horses thrashing in agony only added to the chaos. Others tried to dig rifle pits with knives and mess kits. The hard Montana earth yielded nothing but dust and broken fingernails. The command structure collapses entirely. Custer likely dies early in this phase. A shot through the left temple, another through the chest. Without him, no one takes clear command. Captains die trying to rally their men. Lieutenants die repeating orders no one can hear. Sergeants fall maintaining fire discipline that no longer exists. Leadership bleeds away until there is nothing left but individual men fighting individual deaths. Then the ammunition runs low. Each soldier had carried 100 rounds. In an hour of fighting, most have fired nearly all of it. The pack train with reserve ammunition is 4 miles south with McDougal's company. It might as well be on the moon. Some soldiers stop shooting. They are saving their last bullets. Not for the enemy, for themselves. Archaeological evidence confirms it. Skulls with close-range powder burns. Pistols found in hands still gripping them. Men who chose their own ending rather than face what was coming over that ridge. White Cow Bull, Sitting Bull's nephew, counted coup on a soldier still alive, touching a living enemy in battle, the highest honor in Plains warfare. He described the Bluecoats as brave but crazy, fighting hard but without thinking. By the end, military discipline, the only thing that separates an army from a crowd, had dissolved completely. What remained on that hill was not a military unit. It was a collection of individual human beings, each one dying alone. Boston Custer, the general's youngest brother, had come along as a civilian guide. He had no military obligation to be here. Armstrong Reed, their 18-year-old nephew, had ridden along for adventure. They die within sight of each other on that hillside. 3 Custers and a nephew, dead within 45 minutes. Family bonds meaning nothing to Winchester bullets. The final breakup comes suddenly. A group of soldiers, maybe 20, breaks from the hill and runs north toward a deep ravine that cuts toward the river. It is not retreat, it is flight, pure panic. Men running toward the sound of water they will never reach. Warriors ride them down in the open. Bodies would be found strung out over a quarter-mile, some almost reaching the ravine before death caught them. By 5:15, perhaps 5:30, the shooting sputters out, not all at once. Like a fire dying, a few wounded soldiers still move. Warriors approach carefully. Sometimes a dying man has one shot left. 67 minutes. That is all it took. An entire battalion, 210 men, gone. But on the hillside, one creature still stands. 7 bullets in his body. Blood drying in the Montana heat. Comanche, the only living witness to the death of 210 men. He would carry that memory in silence for another 15 years. The silence after gunfire carries its own terror. Smoke drifts across the hill. Bodies sprawl in clusters. Here, 5 men who died together. There, a lone soldier who made it 20 yards before falling. And then, from the village below they come. Women, children, elderly. They carry clubs, knives, and awls. Many have lost husbands, sons, and fathers to army bullets. If not today, then in previous attacks on peaceful camps. What happens next does not match any romantic notion of noble warfare. These soldiers had come to kill their families. Now families took revenge on the bodies. But before you recoil, understand the logic. In plain spiritual belief, the body a person carried in this life was the body they carried into the next world. Cutting tendons prevented walking in the afterlife. Puncturing eardrums stopped hearing. Slashing thighs hobbled riding. This was not savage cruelty. It was religious warfare. Disarmament of the enemy's soul, as meaningful to the Lakota and Cheyenne as any Christian burial ritual is to the people who practice it. Kate Bighead, a Cheyenne woman, walked among the dead. She was looking for soldiers who had attacked her village at the Washita 8 years earlier. She found none, but she described the scene. The white men were crazy. They fought as individuals, not together. At the end, they shot each other and themselves. Her account, recorded years later, provides the only female perspective of the aftermath. Tom Custer's body was found destroyed so thoroughly that he was identified only by a tattoo over his heart, the goddess of liberty. His heart had been cut out and placed on a rock beside him. And then there was Custer himself. Found near the top of the hill, he had 2 wounds, left temple, chest. His body remained largely untouched, but some accounts say awls were thrust through his ears. The message was specific, so he would hear better in the next world, having failed to hear warnings in this one. 4 miles south, Reno and Benteen's 350 men dug in on the bluffs. Warriors, flushed with victory, pressed attacks until darkness. Through the night of June 25th, the soldiers heard sounds that chilled them to the bone. Victory songs from the village, drums beating steadily, and the distinctive crack of Springfield carbines, their own weapons captured from Custer's dead, now being fired into the darkness. The soldiers recognized the sound of their own guns turned against them. On June 26th, attacks continued. Then, mysteriously, they stopped around noon. By evening, the entire village was moving south. 8,000 people with their pony herds and lodges and everything they owned disappearing into the landscape. Sitting Bull knew more soldiers would come. His vision had been fulfilled. It did not show what came after. Better to disperse and preserve the victory. On June 27th, General Terry's relief column arrived. Lieutenant James Bradley, scouting ahead, saw white objects scattered on distant hills. Through field glasses, the objects resolved into bodies. What they found defied their ability to process. Soldiers stripped naked, bloated in the heat, scattered across miles of grassland. Hardened frontier soldiers vomited. Some openly wept. And then they found Comanche, standing in a ravine, head hanging, covered in dried blood. 7 wounds, still alive. Soldiers tenderly led him to the river. They bathed his wounds. They fed him by hand. The horse would live another 15 years, officially retired from service, never ridden again. led at the head of 7th Cavalry formations with an empty saddle, a living memorial to the dead, and the myths began immediately, and they were all lies. Newspaper headlines screamed of Custer's heroic last stand, surrounded but defiant. Artists painted dramatic scenes, soldiers in perfect squares. Custer prominent with flowing hair and raised saber, standing tall at the center of a ring of brave men. Every detail was invented. Custer did not carry a saber that day. His hair had been cut short before the campaign. The ring of soldiers never existed. The reality of panic, rout, and piecemeal destruction did not fit America's need for a heroic narrative. And so America built one from scratch. Modern archaeology has dismantled the myth completely. Shell casing patterns spread across miles of battlefield show fighting retreats, not heroic squares. Bodies found far from Last Stand Hill confirm panic, not organized resistance. Cartridges with pry marks prove weapons failed at the worst possible moment. The scientific evidence is absolute. There was no last stand. There was only a last collapse. Sitting Bull and Crazy Horse became the most wanted men in America. Within a year, most Plains tribes were forced onto reservations. Sitting Bull fled to Canada, returning to surrender in 1881. He was killed by reservation police in 1890. Crazy Horse surrendered in 1877 and was bayoneted by a guard at Fort Robinson while allegedly resisting arrest. The victory at Little Bighorn sealed their people's fate. America would never tolerate such defiance again. The Black Hills gold that started it all was never returned. Those 210 men did not die as heroes in any honest telling of this story. They died as humans, terrified and alone, abandoned by the tactical system meant to protect them. They died because their commander believed in a myth of native cowardice that shattered on contact with reality. They died because Washington wanted gold more than it honored treaties. They died as pawns in a larger game of conquest and resistance that neither side had chosen, but both sides would pay for in blood. The Fort Laramie Treaty promised the Black Hills forever. Forever lasted 6 years. 210 men paid for those 6 years with their lives, and the people who won the battle lost everything that followed. The victory at Little Bighorn was the beginning of the end for the Plains nations, and the death of Custer's command was the beginning of the myth that justified everything America did next. Today, the Little Bighorn battlefield stands quiet. The wind blows through the same ravines where men sought cover and found death. Markers show where soldiers fell, not in a ring, not in a square, scattered across miles of grassland, running. The truth the paintings never showed, and somewhere in the story a horse stands among the dead, 7 bullets in his body, blood drying in the heat, still standing, the only witness who saw everything and could never speak a word. That may be the most terrifying part of all. If these stories matter to you, subscribe. There are always darker corners still to come.